Hey, my friends, it's Matt. Thanks for hanging out with me on my YouTube channel. This time around, we're going to go visit a church that is really very different from my own tradition. It's an Anglican church that is a part of the ACNA tradition, Anglican Church in North America. This is a different slice of historical Anglicanism than the Episcopal Church or the Anglican Church in the UK. And I think there are going to be elements of this that are really familiar to those of you who grew up around or maybe currently attend in some kind of lower church, evangelical-ish setting. But I also think there's going to be some stuff here that is very familiar and resonates with those of you who are in more of a high church liturgical setting. This is a group that really threads the needle in an interesting way. I'm not an Anglican, but I'm finding Anglicanism to be very interesting right now. And I'm just going to tell you in advance, this is one of my favorite church visits that I've ever gone on, and I think you're going to love it no matter where you're coming from on the spectrum of Christian faith, or even if you're just somebody who's outside looking in because you find all of this stuff interesting, even if you happen to not think there's a God at all. So the church we're going to is in Overland Park, Kansas. It's a suburb of Kansas City, and I'm going to introduce you here to Reverend Patrick Wildman. When I go visit a church, I'm almost always walking in blind. I've never been there before. I'm asking about what I'm seeing in front of me as it's making a first-time impression on me. And here I figured we'd go straight inside. I didn't anticipate this beautiful garden area right here out front, and it looked like it had more thought and theology behind it than just pretty landscaping. So I asked about that, and sure enough, there was more going on. So we're going to start here.
The grounds and everything are stuff that we care a lot about as Anglicans. We're sacramental people, and so we appreciate beauty. We think God works through ordinary things. This garden, we have so many people who will come here and just be blown away before they even get inside, and it's all downhill, I think, maybe.
Oh, come on now, come on.
But we have a volunteer team that does this. Gloria and her team spend a lot of time out here making this look beautiful. And this over here is a columbarium.
There are people buried over here?
My father's buried here.
Really?
Yes. Obviously, you have to be cremated to be buried here. It's really a very poignant moment, I think, in the life of our church when we have someone who has gone on to glory. We have the service inside, and then we literally just come right out, and everybody comes right out, and we do the burial right here.
So, actually, it's kind of like churches in the old world.
Yeah, well, and it's why, when we talk about sacred space, like this, this is really sacred space, and we would never consider like, oh, well, we'll just sell this and move somewhere. No, my dad's buried here.
That changes things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And so we don't allow markers and things like that because it would get really cluttered, obviously. But we put everybody's name up here.
There is something very stabilizing to the life of the congregation, because this list feels like a reminder that people were here before us.
Absolutely.
People did church here before us. There was a mission that predates us and is bigger than us.
That's
here.
Very important to us. So, we think about the people who've gone before us a lot. We work hard to make sure that they feel honored and loved.
When we walked in, I saw that there was one stone, kind of like this Alpha and Omega here, in front of this table. But the stone said, Alleluia, Christ is risen.
Yeah.
There has to be an intentional reminder that the dead here are not dead.
Right.
And that there's far more than just a vague notion of continuity, but that like these are the saints who've gone before. Is that, am I using Anglican language? Are we in the ballpark?
Absolutely. We believe wholeheartedly that, like Chuck, he is with the Lord. And I don't know exactly what that's like, but I know that his frail, dying body has been made whole. And same thing for my dad. I was able to baptize my dad 3 days before his death. I believe that he is alive, actually more alive than he ever was here.
Can I ask you a theology question as we make the loop and head inside?
Yeah.
What do you say at these funerals? I mean, obviously, you remember people, you share kind memories. I've done funerals. I think everybody does that stuff. But it sounds like you have a robust set of beliefs about life, death, what happens after in Christ. What do you explain to people at a funeral about why this hope exists?
Mm-hmm. I always talk about at funerals how we're here to do two things, and they feel like they're at odds with one another. We're here to grieve, we're here to mourn, but we're also here to celebrate, because, and that's what we call the service. It's a celebration of new life. All throughout the liturgy, and in, always in the message that's given, we emphasize that those who have put their faith in Jesus Christ, they are alive. They are with the Lord.
I've been to, obviously, a lot of churches in Europe. Well, not everybody has the good fortune to make it over and to see the old world, but I've been to a lot of churches in England. I've been to quaint churches in Oxford, where you've got the old gravestones out in the courtyard. And despite seeing that all those times and just sort of quaintly noting, oh, well, the living, the dead, the saints militant, the saints triumphant, okay, I get it. I feel like this is one of the first times that I've really stopped to think about all the ways that having this here would affect what's going on here in terms of just the life and the rhythms of the church, but also the life and the heart and the perspective of the people who go to the church, including even the pastor.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic, and it's a very powerful dynamic, and it really changes the way we think about our space. This truly is sacred to us.
We've got old and new here.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Very astute.
Okay, well, I don't know about that. It's just that this wall looks like the outside wall.
It was the outside wall. Yeah.
All right, so the church expanded this way as it grew.
Yeah, absolutely. This was the original outside wall. Those were the original narthex, the glass in the original narthex doors, which I'll show you where those were.
Is that a uniquely Anglican symbol?
The Cairo?
The Cairo with the circle on top of the cross?
No, but it was the original church logo.
Oh, it was?
Yeah. And then that's the new church logo.
So what does the new church logo mean that is different than the old church logo?
Okay, so we're a church that cares about the past, right? And obviously the now and the future. But so you've got the circle, which is God's eternal kingdom. You've got the path of life, Psalm 16. Okay. So the kingdom is life. So when we are in God's kingdom, that's how we experience life at its fullness, the abundant life that Jesus talks about. And that life comes through Christ, Cairo, and his cross.
That's a great logo.
It is. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And then that's our vision statement, to be a people fully alive in God's kingdom.
What does that mean?
Was it Irenaeus? I may have that wrong, but who said, the glory of God is man fully alive. So Jesus said that he came that we might have life and have it abundantly. So it's not that you and I aren't alive. We're alive physically, but there's something more. There's more, and that more is this abundant life that only comes through Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's life as it was intended to be. Life as we were created to experience, but because of our fall, because of basically how we've kind of made a mess of things, we don't experience. But as we give ourselves to Jesus Christ and we follow him, more and more we're able to be transformed and to experience that fullness of life that comes through him.
And just walking in from the vehicle, going by this incredibly perspective-giving space here that, I mean, what is so much of what makes us not alive? It's the anxiety of the moment. It's pressure about right now, pressure about a week from now. So the first thing I'm greeted with when I come in is the reminder that Christ is risen, and that in him that same promise is for me as a kingdom of the citizen, as a child of the king.
Yeah.
And then I come in and see this, and I feel like I'm a lot more equipped to think about the fullness of those implications because of what you did here. And it's beautiful. What I notice as I peek around the corner and look down this hall is that I'm in an Anglican church.
Yeah.
And yet I am seeing things that look more historical, more nods to old world Protestant Christianity than I would see in a typical evangelical church that popped up in the suburbs in the last couple decades.
Right.
But this wing, that's very familiar. That looks like some of the big churches I've worked at.
Yeah.
Drywall, fire suppression systems, meeting area. Like, this looks like a very practical space. Why is all of this here?
Well, our offices are at the very far end of that, and then there's a big meeting space at the end of there. Then we have our children's wing.
So teaching beyond Sunday morning, like, you needed space for it.
Yeah.
It's a value.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking down this hallway, but I'm seeing a banner in here that catches my eye. I know we need to head this way, but can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is our cafe. This is where people gather, after services and stuff on Sunday mornings. These banners were made by members of the church, and they used to hang in the nave. And when we remodeled, we took them out, but we keep them displayed.
So these have been here for a while then?
Oh yeah, they're I want to say early to mid 70s.
Okay. I feel like that's kind of when the banner thing was hot.
This one really doesn't have a name. That's the budded cross. This one is just the obvious symbols: eternity, the Holy Spirit coming down, Christ, the cross.
Sure.
That's the budded cross. The three buds are symbolic of the Trinity, and the crown, and that's the crown of life that we receive.
So we've got the three buds at the end of each extension represent the Trinity, but four crowns representing, looks like they're in the position of the wounds of Christ.
Well, minus but the crown of life is representative of the crown that we receive through Christ when we go be with him.
And that is an Anglican symbol historically?
That's an ancient Christian symbol.
Okay.
And then that's a St. Andrew's cross. The history is that he was crucified on a cross, an X-shaped cross like that.
This is what inspired the Bolton family sigil. And a crown of thorns there.
Yeah.
I don't know, Yeah, that's not even like a joke. It did inspire a recent popular fantasy series about a family known for violent executions. Like, the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing there.
Yeah.
You're drawing on old imagery here. So then, Sunday morning, the main stuff happens here.
Yeah, people come in and they hang out here, come into the nave. And that's what we call this space, nave. It's not a sanctuary. I mean, it is a sanctuary, but we call it the nave. Nave, navy, ship.
Sure.
And so when you come in, you look up, and that looks like the hull of a ship.
As much as any church I've ever been in, it really does.
It symbolizes, obviously, there's Noah's Ark, but that the church, Christ, is the greater, truer manifestation of, he carries us through the waters of judgment, safely and securely.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're talking about this as a nave, because construction style-wise, my dad's Baptist church that he was at forever in Riverton, Wyoming, it's got this similar mid-century glulam beam construction that is evocative of the ship, but they wouldn't call it a nave because it's an evangelical Baptist church. So they would say sanctuary because there's no historical acknowledgement of a separate altar, and they would have a Baptistic view of the sacraments. But in terms of what it ends up communicating, either way, it's very similar between that sanctuary and this nave. The thing that stands out to me as being unique, stuff I've never seen before. I've seen this. I've seen a stone church before. But seeing that with this stained glass separating the two design elements, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. When did this go in? What does it mean?
Emil Fry and Associates did this. They're St. Louis, and very kind of prominent in the stained glass world. They did these windows. They were installed in, I believe, 71. You know, this side tells the story of God in creation and his revelation of himself through the Hebrew people. And then you end over here with Christ and the church. This side, the story actually starts with the people right there. And because this was in the narthex, so they didn't consider this part of the story, except that this part right here was just things that were meaningful to people in the congregation at the time, the founders. So like we had several people in our founders who were pilots for TWA, and this was a transportation hub. The arrowhead is for the Kaw Indians, who were the native people here. But in 1971, the Chiefs were also very good.
I've never seen a Denver Broncos logo in stained glass in the Colorado area. That's bold. I mean, that's commitment right there. Is there any kind of George Brett reference here?
No. This is before George.
Oh, it is before George. You're right. Okay.
But so the story picks up here with the people, and this is basically humankind's response to God's revelation.
So cultivation, art, design. I got it. I never would have decoded it though if you hadn't told me that this was in the narthex as kind of an addendum. I would have stared at that plane like missionary travel bag. Now I get it though. So on this side we're starting at the back. And this is the anthropological side, the human response.
And so you see the unity of the human race, the two hands, and the various expressions of the dwellings. You know,
from around the world.
And then the eyeball there, the eye is the presence of God, and the flame is the power of God. And so as we encounter God through Jesus Christ, that's when we come to faith and the church is born. The believers in Christ are represented by the birds.
I mean, you have science windows and natural philosophy windows. I mean, Pythagoras, Democritus, Einstein, Plato is referenced right there. You get the test tubes and the abacus.
So so the point is that God created and revealed himself, and the ways that we have responded to that are much bigger than just like what we do in church. Like these things also bring glory to God.
And tell the story of God.
And tell the story,
I mean, the universal language that God writes onto existence can be discovered through those avenues to some extent as well.
But the thing that I really love about the stained glass, other than they're just so cool, I mean, but what is clear is that, you know, these clearly fit the vibe of 1971, 72. Mid-century modern.
It's weird that you don't have a macrame owl in here.
But I think that this says something about Anglicanism. Because what these stained glass windows communicate to me is that the original founders of the church and the people who were involved in putting in these windows, they were very concerned about, we believe the ancient story of God, but we want to be able to tell it in a modern, relevant way for today.
So these windows are not telling me that this side is supplanting this side. These windows are telling me these things speak the truth, and these things are mechanisms of delivering this story to all the peoples. So it's a continuation, not a move away from.
Right. And so I think that speaks somewhat to the Anglican ethos, the via media, the middle way. You know, Thomas Cranmer, when he wrote the preface to the original prayer book, you know, he stated very clearly, like, he wanted to get back to the ancient traditions of the church. You know, like you read Justin Martyr.
Sure.
I don't know when his first apology was, like maybe like 150 AD.
Sure.
And he writes about Christian worship. And Cranmer looks at that and he's like, well, that's what we're going to do. Because you read that and you're like, well, it's all there. The scripture readings, the peace, communion, it's all there. Mm-hmm. This is what Christians have been doing since the very beginning.
Yeah, it's in the DDK.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
so
evident.
He wanted to recapture that and simplify it, but make it relevant for the people of their day. Put it in English. And so that, I think, is a cool thing about Anglicanism. We want to stay rooted in the past, but we also want to be relevant in today.
At the risk of offending
that's
not you,
that's
but
not
others.
easy.
No, it's not. And what I see as I go around and do this is that everybody feels that pressure. Save those who most embrace there's just is no way to modernize this or communicate it to the now.
Right.
You're just going to need to come to us. I understand that strategy exists and that theological impulse exists in some traditions. But beyond that, for the most part, what I see is everybody grappling with that tension through all of church history, but especially in the age of technological wonder in the last 150 years, with culture doing a wholesale turnover every generation or generation and a half.
Yeah.
It's a whole new equation. It's a whole new thing. And maybe that started to become evident in the 1960s, 1970s, on the heels of the counterculture stuff. Mm-hmm. And so what I see as I walk in here as somebody who likes history but has a lot to learn is this feels like a group that was right on the front end of understanding that tension and how that tension was going to play out in the coming decades, and what those people, so many of whom are now buried out there, left for you in these windows was a reminder, this is our impulse. We're not going to bunker up, but we're also not dropping this to make our Jesus more appealing to the ever-changing world.
No, we
the
have to
ever-changing
stay
world
rooted.
needs this stasis.
We have to stay rooted, but at the same time, work to be relevant and make sense to the people of our day.
That's $10,000 really well spent.
Yeah.
I feel good about
That's
that.
the best $10,000 we've ever spent for sure.
Yeah. These kneelers at your altar rail, was that made by the glass company in St. Louis as well? Do they deal in kneelers also?
No, a designer here in Kansas City designed them, and then people in the church made them.
How long ago?
70s. When we remodeled, we said, look, we're going to do new flooring or whatever, but we're not getting rid of these.
But why not just upgrade, get something more stylish with more recent sensibilities?
No way. These are just cool, man.
They are just cool.
Have you ever seen any church with kneelers like that? No.
No, I have not.
They're amazing. And our altar guild does a lot of work on just making sure these stay maintained.
Buildings have to get overhauled from time to time,
right?
Especially when we don't have the medieval budget and the full force of the state to fund it,
right?
But these points of continuity,
right? So the looks of this changed a little bit. The flooring's new and all of that, but the kneelers stay.
Okay.
The altar stayed.
That's the original?
It's not the original altar, but it goes back to the 70s.
All right.
And it weighs like 1,000 or 2,000 pounds, like it isn't moving.
Yeah, I wondered if it stayed because of theological conviction or unbelievable weight.
Both.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Both. But if you look at the altar, one of the things that I really love is the frontal on the altar. A monk named Vincent Crosby, he made these frontals for us. And we said, look, kind of match the vibe of our stoles, and I think he really did an amazing job.
Do you wear a stole? What is that for the uninitiated?
Yeah.
Can I join you up here? Should I stay down here?
Absolutely. No. Come on up. By the way, my wife did these. She does flowers.
She's a talented lady.
She does some amazing work.
Are these living?
They're living, of course. We don't put fake flowers up here.
Well, we do. So I'm impressed.
No fake flowers. We do altar flowers every Sunday. And then those get sent out, taken to people, maybe somebody in the hospital or...
It'd be weird to put the investment that you put into cultivating the natural world out there And then they go to Hobby Lobby and grab some of the fake flowers. So I get it.
So this is a priest stole.
Okay.
And we wear these on Sundays. So very simple, but I really love the work that Vincent does. He's an amazing craftsman. Very simple, but elegant, beautiful. And it just fits the vibe, I think. Yeah. All of it is kind of tied in. It just fits the vibe of the space.
Do you wear this over additional vestments, or do you dress like?
Yeah, I typically wear a white alb.
All right. An alb is the robe?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do any of this in my tradition.
White robe. So
like this would be fancy for us.
Yeah. So I wear that at the first service, our 8:15 service.
Okay.
It's our more traditional service. And then at the next two services, I take the alb off and I just, plain clothes.
Okay.
But when I'm doing a priestly function, I have the alb on. So if I'm giving the absolution, if I'm doing the blessing, and of course if I'm celebrating communion.
Is this meant to convey the uniqueness of the office within Anglicanism? Do you have apostolic succession within Anglicanism? Yes. Okay.
Yes. And so it's a symbol of the office. And we feel like that at a minimum, like if we're not having the vestments on, then we have to have the stole.
All right.
Yeah.
So then the Eucharist, is that every Sunday?
Every Sunday.
And is that the conclusion of the service every Sunday?
That's the conclusion of the service every Sunday. And I should point out that's a Christ Church tradition since the late 70s to do communion every week. That's not necessarily an Anglican tradition. Like throughout most of Anglican history, communion was once a month.
All right. This space it's not low church. This is beautiful. I haven't even looked back at this window. My goodness. Okay, well, even more so than 1 second ago before I turned, this space is not low church, but it's also not the highest of high church.
No.
There's a ton as I walk in, including looking through these windows all the way down, like I mentioned earlier, that looks just really familiar.
Yeah.
Baptist, Reformed, Evangelical, something you build in the suburbs. So I feel very at home in that regard. But in all those kind of churches I just described, usually the altar wouldn't look like this. Usually there wouldn't be any kind of vestments. We would usually say communion, which I know you might use that term as well, but we wouldn't say Eucharist. We wouldn't refer to it that way historically. Yeah. And so is this lower church, I don't mean that as a pejorative at all, than most Anglican churches?
Yes. So, and this goes back to our founding.
Right.
So the founders of this church came from an Anglican Episcopal church downtown. Most of them came from this church, Grace and Holy Trinity Cathedral. And it's very much in the high church spectrum. But this was the far southern edge of the city at the time, in the late 50s when they started. And their intent was to plant a lower church, Anglican church. That DNA has kind of stayed with us throughout. We have tended to be on the lower church end of the spectrum. The lower church, more Protestant, evangelical, end of the spectrum within Anglicanism. Because Anglicanism is a big tent, and you have almost everything under the sun, in that tent.
And does that come through on a Sunday morning? I mean,
Absolutely. Well, just the very fact that I would lead two services without vestments.
Yeah.
And not even wearing a collar. Like, that's not typical in the Anglican world.
Well, as people who've watched some of my videos know, the churches that I've led were so low that at times I was like, oh, that's right, I try to remember to take my hat off. So for me, without a collar, but understanding that Western Wyoming, out in the woods, the cowboys, it's just such a different thing. As I've gotten outside my little bubble and realized, I now realize that what you're saying is a big deal, and that does convey meaning, that matters, that says something about who you're trying to reach,
Yeah.
and what you're trying to do. So let me ask you this.
Yeah, well, it gets back to that relevant word.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you see where I'm going.
Yeah.
Who are you trying to reach, and what are you trying to do?
Yeah. Well, we're trying to reach people who are disconnected from Christ and His church. That's why we run the Alpha course. I mean, so we're not just trying to reach Anglicans, which, by the way, just wouldn't be a very good strategy because there's not very many of them out there. So if you make that your strategy, well, we're just a church for Anglicans, well, you've pretty much guaranteed that you're going to be a pretty small church because it's a pretty small fishing pond, if you will.
And that strategy would just be trying to, beat out other Anglican churches?
Yeah.
When Anglicans move to town, you try to make sure you get most
So we're
of
trying
them.
to reach people who are disconnected from Christ and His church. I mean, that goes back to Jesus' words, the Great Commission. So we very much want to make disciples, and we think that, on some level to do that, we've got to try to speak in a way, 1 Corinthians, I become all things to all men that indeed I might save some. So we're trying to do that on some level.
So who comes outside of Anglicanism? What kind of person sees this and resonates with
Interestingly, Anglicans, we're kind of having a moment right now where we're having more and more people who are coming to us saying, I read N.T. Wright and just wanted to check out an Anglican church, or I read a book by our bishop, Todd Hunter. He's an author, and he's written quite a few books, and so they've read one of his books and just wanted to check us out. Like, that didn't happen 20 years ago. So we are having more people who come to us looking for something that's more liturgical, something that checking out an Anglican church and see what it's like. But a lot of the people that come to us are people that are people that maybe left the Catholic Church years and years ago for whatever reason. So we do have quite a few ex-Catholics who find their way here, and I think they're kind of a little bit thrown off by the preaching and all of that. It's a little bit different. It's much more evangelical in nature.
The congregant does a little bit more of the lifting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more of an expectation that
you
dive deep into this. And
but the form feels familiar.
Yeah.
And for some, that brings some comfort.
I have more questions. Also, my friend Nate, I think I can hear him grunting and straining because the camera is heavy. Do you have time that we could set up chairs and sit down for a minute and talk more about it? Okay.
Sure.
Let's do that. Thank you for this.
Yeah.